History is full of rich connections to God and the great outdoors He created for us. I'm on a mission to fellowship with other fathers as we introduce our sons and daughters to the beauty and bounty of the world where we are blessed to walk with our Heavenly Father in His garden. My name is Jacob Whitley, and this is Fathers and the Great Outdoors. This episode is brought to you by greatoutdoorspodcast.com, where you can find a lot of fun merch, including custom-designed Christian-based apparel, the Genesis 27:3, Take Your Quiver and Your Bow and Go Hunt Me Some Venison, or He Leads Me Beside Still Waters, He Restores My Soul. It's a nice little fishing shirt. Be sure to check out greatoutdoorspodcast.com today. Welcome to Fathers in the Great Outdoors. Thank you for supporting this program. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. Today we have Ben Ricks. How you doing?
Doing well. Hope you are.
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thanks for coming on.
Sure thing. Sure thing. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I forgot in that intro to mention you're also one of the hosts of Two Bald Biologists.
Yeah. So I'm a biologist for the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission, and we also have a podcast. It's not ours. It's the Wildlife Commission's, and we talk about the fisheries research that we do across the state and the different angling opportunities that are found, from the coast all the way to the mountains. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's real interesting. We're able to showcase all the research that we do and kind of fish nerd out on that, but also talk a lot about fishing as well. So
yeah, how much do things change year to year from basically the coast to the mountains?
Well, especially on the coast, things change all the time. Right now, we have our migratory fish coming into the rivers to spawn. So the shad, the herring, the stripers, that kind of thing. And then, but we could have a big storm and a lot of swamp water drain into our rivers and cause a fish kill, and everything can change in a heartbeat, So it's not like my stuff. It's not like reservoirs. They stay fairly consistent over time, but the coastal rivers can change drastically.
Interesting. So what got you interested in getting into that field?
Well, I'd love to tell you that, I was, really interested in the environment and I wanted to make the environment better. In all honesty, I was a very avid fisherman, and I needed to figure out if I learned as much as I could about fish, that I'd be able to catch more. Now, the wanting things to be better and cleaning up the environment and all that kind of stuff came later. But in all honesty, I wanted to catch more fish, and I figured the best way to do that was to learn as much about fish as I could. So,
oh yeah, that makes sense. So did you end up going to school specifically for that then?
Yeah, I did my undergraduate at NC State University, and then I got my master's degree from Auburn. Studied under some great folks. My master's project was evaluating tournaments and their impacts on the fishery. So it was a really neat project.
That's interesting. What was the result of that? Was it a positive or negative?
Well, to boil it down into, just a few seconds, bass tournaments do have effects on populations. The mortality is primarily related towards water temperature. In fact, the higher the water temperature is, the more mortality you see. And then also we looked at short-term stockpiling. So the fish were stockpiling at the release site for about a 6-month window, and then they dispersed after that. So we also had some negative effects just because there's so many fish in a given area. We saw their condition go down, the ones that did survive. So
right. Does the number of boats in the water affect the temperature overall?
Not necessarily a number of boats, but summertime tournaments, you'd expect to see a lot of mortality. Wintertime tournaments, you would expect to see less, is kind of the
Okay.
general trend. Now a larger tournament, holding times can vary and that kind of thing. The longer you hold a fish, the more stressed out it can be. Everything's additive. The second you catch a fish, you can kind of think about it in that the stressors start to happen to that fish. And the best thing you can do if you're not going to eat it is to put it right back in the water right then and there. And anything you do beyond that is adding stress to that fish, and sometimes they succumb to mortality. It's oftentimes not a good or a bad thing as much as it's just something that we need to understand as we manage these populations. So
Yeah. How did that affect your approach to fishing once you've made those discoveries?
well, it's as far as keeping fish alive, it's all about fish care and making sure that you're taking the best care as you can about the fish. But really, the take home message for me is either put it back in the water or put it in a cooler. There's no middle ground in a lot of regards as far if you're really interested in fish survival.
Hmm.
So I don't, in my own personal fishing, I rarely cull fish. I won't say that I don't, but if we're keeping fish, keep your limit, and then you're catch and release the rest of the day. That's kind of the best way to do it. So it's best when you have a fish in your hand, you decide right then and there, does this fish need to go back in the river, or does this fish need to go in a cooler? So
Right. I thought about getting one of those the sticky tape measures that you use for
right.
scoring antlers and just taping it on the side of my fishing rod so that I could easily tell right away.
Sure. One of the best things you can do if you catch a fish is to have all your stuff out, So
Hmm.
you want to have your camera out, your ruler out, all that stuff. You shouldn't be digging around for it, because you want to minimize that handling time as much as you can if you are, catching and releasing that day. And that way you catch the fish, he's in the boat, you snap a picture, 20, 30 seconds, he's swimming back around, going right back to where you caught them from. So, and that's kind of the best way to do it if you're interested in minimizing um your impact as an angler. But even if you're a catch and release angler, there's a mortality associated with that, and it's you're naive to think that you're not having an impact at all. Now, granted, your impact, especially if you're conscientious, is as minimal as possible. And I'm not going to tell anybody not to fish, because I'm out there fishing too. But you just need to know that what you're doing is having an impact.
Yeah. What is the big reasons behind the barbless laws?
To minimize destructive impact to the fish. So anytime that there's a barbless hook regulation, that means that hook and mortality um, can be a significant contributor to that population in terms of mortality, either because of a variety of reasons, really, but mainly it's a large amount of pressure or just to try to minimize that angling impact.
Hmm.
So, but circle hooks are another option that helps minimize that too, because a lot of times you get the way that hook, when you go tight on it, you know you got a higher chance of hooking that fish in the lips and not in the soft structure in the back of the throat or something like that.
Right. Have you heard anybody talk about that as more making it more of a sport by having it barbless?
Um, no, but it could be, because you what, especially as you're learning to use barbless hooks, um, there's definitely, you know, it's a little bit trickier to keep one hooked, and sometimes they can shake off and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it can be. Myself around Newbern, Where I live, especially if I'm looking for striped bass, I use barbless hooks for striped bass. And we have a pretty decent topwater fishery here. You know, it's not a lot of big fish relatively. And by big, I mean these fish aren't 20, 30, 40 pounds. These fish are 10 pounds or less. So you're not going to catch the fish of a lifetime. So if one shakes off, you really haven't lost anything. Um, it's a fishery where I use barbless hooks, shake them off, go catch another one, you know.
Yeah.
So
What is your thoughts on like if the hook is like swallowed by the fish and it's just you feel like you're going to do more damage to the fish trying to get the hook out versus just cutting it?
right. If it's yeah, the more you tear, especially the soft tissue, the higher likelihood that fish is going to succumb to mortality. So the best thing you could do in that instance would be to clip it and hope for the best.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's about all you can do as an angler, you know, because you can't undo it once it's happened. So that is probably the best thing you could do in that situation if you deep hooked a fish, um, is to just hook it off and hope that that fish can work it out. And I mean, some of these fish are going to die. Some of these fish is amazing. I've seen them work baits out of the side of their body. You know, they've pushed a hook out the side of their body, not even through their digestive tract, but they just push it. You know, they just work it out.
Hmm.
You know, through their skin over time. So it's wild.
Yeah, that is interesting. I wonder if there's something i- in the idea that they were created a certain way by God, if there's something kind of evolutionary involved with that is more geared toward maybe a different kind of predator rather than a fisherman.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they get foreign body. I mean, not just hooks. You know, they get foreign bodies in them for all different types of reasons, and they have to. You know, they've developed a way to deal with those. So,
Yeah.
you know.
So jumping back even farther, when you were first getting started in the outdoors, what was that experience like?
Sure. Well, I was pretty lucky. My dad and granddads were avid, you know. I mean, my granddads were probably more into it because, you know, the depression and that kind of thing. They fished because they had to.
Mm,
My dad was an avid fisherman, hunter. We grew up, it was just what we did. You know, we didn't really, you know, some folks play golf, some folks do other things, but you know, we hunted and fished, and it was what we did. It was what my dad was passionate about it. It developed an interest for both my brother and I, and we are still very avid. You know, if I'm not spending time, well, of my free time, fishing and hunting is a pretty good chunk, probably an unfair chunk of my free time. But my family's involved in it. We have a farm that we manage deer and trees and turkeys, and you know, we're about to do a control burn, that kind of stuff. I have a pond where I manage the fish population there. You know, it's just part of what we do. You know, not just the hunting and the fishing, but the stewardship component and the conservation now. So
right. What what was it like? It looks like you have one kid.
I have one kid. She's 5 years old, and she's a girly girl, and she likes touching fish eyeballs, so it works out.
Sounds like my daughter.
Um, yeah, we deer hunt, we turkey hunt, we go catch fish. You know, she can put it to a redfish with the best of them. So it's been a lot of fun getting her out and you know, seeing her experience these things, and you know, it's pretty impressive. I mean, she already knows fish ID, and you know, she's really interested in it, and I hope it stays that way. But it's also a different you know, a day where you and I would go fishing is a different day than when I take her. There's, we might fish for a while. We may go swimming. We may throw the cast net. We may play with crabs. We may try to catch shrimp. It's really all about whatever she wants to do and trying to keep her interested in it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a different focus for sure, but it's no less fun,
Yeah. There was
I
one,
mean, I may want to fish the whole time, but you got
yeah.
to take into consideration you have a young kid's attention span, and sometimes we just eat snacks and go for a boat ride, and that's cool too.
What one of the interviews I did, he said that when you take your kids fishing, you don't fish because you're so focused on them.
Right. Well, yeah, or if you fish, it's for the only intent of hooking a fish to hand off,
Right.
So, but yeah, it's definitely a different set of priorities when you have kids on the boat.
Mm-hmm.
So,
What was the experience like when you were first introducing her to fishing?
so my experience with that is really weird because she's pretty young. She's about as young as you can be and not be called a COVID baby, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so we had her right before all the COVID craziness happened, and so it was really interesting to have an infant during COVID. And I mean, only thing we do is go out on the boat,
Mm-hmm.
And so we had her out on the boat, you know, super early, way earlier than what traditionally people would think is sane, but we had a big time. We were having family experiences. We were out there, catching fish, and it was a lot of fun, and so she probably won't ever have a time where she doesn't remember fishing because she started so I mean, she was on a beanbag, when she couldn't even hold her head up straight, um, while we were out there enjoying the water. So
Yeah. Pretty much grew up born in it.
that's right. That's right. And it was a decision my wife and I made of, this we are a hunting and fishing family, among other things. And this is just what this family does. And, it's a lot of fun. In fact, I fish a lot on my own, and I find that when we are out as a family on the water, a lot of times I put my wife on the front of the boat, and my daughter and I will play around in the back of the boat, and then I'm like, I fished yesterday. You can sit on the front of the boat and catch fish today. That'll be totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of fun. So
Yeah. I'm gonna have to try to do that with 3 kids.
oh, it's definitely becomes more of a circus the more kids you put on the boat.
Yeah.
I've had larger groups of kids on the boat before, and it definitely adds. Every kid is its own variable, and so when you have three, that's a lot to watch, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So
Has she expressed any interest in hunting?
yes, yeah. Oh, she hunts. We turkey hunt. We deer hunt. We were we watched a nice 7-pointer this right after Thanksgiving this year, and we decided to let it walk. But yeah, we deer hunt. She was with me this year on my first hunt this season. She and I shot a doe together, and she sees a deer and she knows that we eat them and we clean them, and it's in fact right around Christmas time. She was holding her little pink toy gun, and she looked at me and she's like, "Daddy, my gun's not real." I was like, "You're right, and I hear what you're saying, but we're not quite there yet, babe." But no, it's a lot of time. I'm blessed that I've got some land in my family that we hunt on and we manage, as I mentioned before, and it's really a fun time because my daughter can get in a deer stand with me, and that's anywhere, depending on her level of patience, it could be 30-45 minutes, or it could be 3 hours of good daddy daughter time, and you're never going to get that time back, and you're never going to be able to spend it on anything more important. So,
Yeah. What was her commenting about the 7 pointer she let walk?
oh, she thought it was neat. I mean, he was big, and she, next week she's telling everybody that we saw a good buck, and she's excited about it. It was a really neat, neat experience. So
Was there a particular reason that you guys didn't take it?
we tried the man. My brother's a wildlife biologist, so that tells you how deep it was that hunting and fishing was in with us.
Hmm.
I'm a fish biologist, and my brother's a wildlife biologist. On our farm, we've just made the decision that we're going to try to harvest mature bucks. Um,
Okay.
and he needed another year or two before he would be that. So we do plenty of doe harvest. You know, we a large chunk of our protein is venison, and that's totally okay. But yeah, on the buck side, I might shoot a buck every 2 to 3 years, maybe even longer, depending on how things shake out, and that's fine. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was just curious if there was a hesitation on her part or not. But it sounds like it was more of just like a
Oh
family
no,
rule.
no, yeah, she's all about it. In fact, 2 years ago, I made the mistake. I had a group of does come out real close to us, and I just wanted her to. I thought, wow, they're really close. This is a good time for her to just kind of see what it's like to have deer close. Not 100 yards off or something like that. And the
Hmm.
deer were all around us, and I let her see them, and the deer walked off, and she was kind of disappointed with me after after that moment that we didn't get one. But I was like, baby, it's not all about shooting a deer. Sometimes it's just about enjoying your time in the woods.
Hmm.
So but
When you guys are in the blind, do you find that a good moment to talk about things that you wouldn't necessarily talk about at home, kind of having that intimate moment?
yeah, I think so. I mean, any of those times on the boat, in a turkey blind, in a deer blind, even just in the truck, going to swim lessons or something like that. I think you have to choose your moments to kind of talk about things. And I'm sure as she gets older, we'll talk about more and more serious things. But yeah, we talk. I think those are all good times because it is kind of a special time that you can really kind of open up and talk about things, and I think it's a lot of fun. So
How is her relationship with God?
impressive,
Oh yeah.
impressive is what I can say about it right now. If you ask her what the most important thing is, now part of this is us, and no small amount of credit is given to her mother, because she's 100% as well. But if you ask her right now what the most important thing is, she'll say to love Jesus,
Hmm.
and she says that's her answer to that question with great consistency. Um, Now part of that is that we've made sure that she knows that's the answer to that question, is that it is the most important thing is to have a relationship with Jesus. Um, the other day I asked her to tell me about, you know, Adam and Eve. And for a 5-year-old, it was impressive that she recounted the story and talked about, sneaky snake. And,
Hmm.
she even was like, and then Adam and Eve couldn't get back into the Garden of Eden. And there was an angel there with a fiery sword. I mean, spared no detail and told the whole story. And I was just like, well, we're doing something here.
Hmm.
And it was great that you know, that she's. I mean, kids are a sponge, and you got to be careful because they will sponge up whatever you put them around.
Oh yeah.
And they pick up on things that you don't even realize they're picking up on until all of a sudden they parrot it back, and it's either humbling or helpful, and I've had plenty of doses of both, you know. So, but
Yeah.
and she's parroted back some things that I wish she wouldn't at times as well. So,
Say something wrong when the fish gets off the hook.
yeah, yeah, you never know, you know, those ears are always listening, but they will say back what you don't want them to on occasion. So, but no, we are, you know, very passionate, very active in our church, very active in our faith, and you know, the only legacy that I can leave for her that really has any meaning or worth is that she has a relationship with God. And if I do nothing else, but I do that right, I think I've done well. You know,
Hmm.
she may not like fishing. You know, she may be 30 years old and can't stand fishing, but if she loves Jesus and she knows that she needs to find a husband who has a similar faith, then I'm gonna call it a win and we'll be okay. You know, so
Yeah, absolutely. Where would you say you guys see God in the great outdoors?
everywhere. I mean, it's just it's the blessing just to be able to do it. You know, like we're just so blessed to be able to hunt and fish the way that we do. Um, Step one is that we can, and then step two is all the things that we get to see while we're doing it. You know, simple stuff like, you know, animals doing things that we would never get. I mean, yeah, you could say the sunrise, which is maybe even is accurate, but maybe somewhat of a cliche answer. But it's in more than that. It's in the fact that, you know, and I think about this every time on the farm. You know, my dad raised us up a certain way. He you know, was responsible with what the Lord gave him. And I look at that farm and I'm like, this is evidence of the Lord keeping his promise that if you know, are responsible, you know, there will be returns on that. Not that having faith in Jesus is a great Ponzi scheme, because it's not, because it's not easy either. But it does tell you about God's faithfulness and how he blesses us. And I think
Hmm.
I mean, also, you know, the amazing things that the Lord's created for us, and the things that we need to steward and conserve because he has blessed us with it. But it's just so much. I mean, it's in everything when you're in the outdoors, you know, because they're all gifts that we're responsible for.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you, in your particular field, do you find God popping up in little things that you're discovering?
I think so. And it's the things that you see. I mean, I did a podcast with some guys I know about a year or so ago, and he asked me, he's like, you know, you're a biologist. How do you make space for your faith in your career?
Hmm.
And I was like, I've never once thought about it that way. You know, how do you make space for something that's already part of you? You know, and it's the same way with this. Is it, you know, if you're seeking the kingdom of God and what you do, then you're going to find him, you know, because you will see what you're looking for. And it's
Yeah.
the same way with the work we do. You know, it's it's really no different, you know, than when I'm out hunting or fishing. You know, I'm out in the woods and in the swamps and tracking up and down these creeks, and I'm seeing things that I don't like, that most people don't get the opportunity to see, and I get to see it. It's part of my job. It's part of what I do for a living, you know, and you know, I'm blessed that I can hop in a boat and go, you know, go look at whatever, you know, needs to be looked at in the moment. But while I'm out there doing that, who knows what else I'll see? And that's an amazing opportunity to be that immersed in creation, you know. Well, now that I'm a supervisor, not on a daily basis as much as I would like for it to be, but I still get those opportunities from time to time. So
Do you get to talk about that at all in your podcast?
not so much on our podcast. We've alluded to it. Both of us have both me and my co-host. We both have faith. We both have talked about it. We're good friends. But we focus on the research and the science that we do, and fishing opportunities across the state. So it's not it's not that we're avoiding it. It's just the intent of that podcast is just it's focused at a different audience. And so it's just a different objective. And I mean, it is part of who we both are. And I think if you listen to the podcast, and as you listen to the podcast and you get to know us, I think you could make some assumptions and infer some things about how we see the world, and you'd probably be right. But it's not overt, because that's just not our objective in the moment,
Right. What would you say that you think the significance is of the importance of a father's role in teaching your kids about God and Christ?
You don't have a job that's any more important. Is my I the only thing of all the things I have, and I'm fairly blessed. I got a garage full of tackle and all these fishing rods and all these fishing baits. I got more fishing baits than I'll ever use. I'm not going to be able to take a single one of those things to heaven with me.
Mm-hmm.
The only legacy that I have that I'll be able to hopefully bring to heaven with me is my daughter. And so, I want to make sure that she's there with me, and that not just that. It's not about heaven. I mean, heaven is the byproduct of us having a relationship with God. The objective is not to be in heaven. The objective is to have a relationship with God. And there's nothing more important than instilling that in my daughter to me.
Yeah, that's very important. I like that line of the only thing you can bring to heaven with you. I might have to make that a t-shirt.
Hey, go for it. Go for it. But no, it's true, because there's nothing else that there's nothing else. And, there'll be a time when I'm not here, and she will be. And I hope in that amount of time, she finds her path and she finds her own way to have that relationship with God. But she won't. I know plenty of people that, have that, road to Damascus story where they were a certain way, and, they saw the light and changed their ways. And that's amazing. But to me, what's almost even more amazing is that my grandparents felt this way, and they instilled that in my parents. They instilled that in me, and it's my job to instill that in my daughter. And it goes back for so much time. Like, that's huge.
Yeah.
And that's a miracle in its own right. And yeah, I grew up in the church, and my parents taught me to believe in God. Everybody has heard that story, and I don't think you realize just how fantastic that really is, because there's a legacy there that at any one moment, any one of, my great grandparents or grandparents could have made a decision that wasn't consistent with that. And I might not know what I know now because of that. And so, yeah, it's a huge, legacy. And hopefully, if I instill that in my daughter, she'll instill that in her kids,
Right.
and it will be continually perpetuated, So,
yeah, I had a very similar background. My dad actually wrote an article about his grandfather, so my great grandfather. He had a kind of a conversion. I guess he was an abusive father to my grandfather. But from that point, from that conversion on, it's been teaching kids about Christ, and all the way down to my kids. And growing up, I just assumed that everybody was like that. And then at some point, I guess kind of my own testimony, if you will, was finding out that a lot of people that attend church are actually broken and don't have that background. And I realized how blessed I was because of that.
Well, I mean, and we're all broken one way or another, right?
Yeah.
None of us are perfect. We all fall short, and that's the thing. Like I mean, much as I don't want to admit it, I fall short multiple times every day,
Hmm.
from what I should do. And I mean but that's the job, right? You get up, you recognize what you're doing wrong, you do better, you you build this relationship with God about it, and you keep pushing forward. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do, and the only thing that the Bible has promised us is that it's not easy, and that there will be lots of trouble.
Yeah.
There's no examples of it being, nothing but, easy street. There's over and over again, it shows that one, God blessed us. Two, we forgot about it and did wrong. And then three, God forgave us and blessed us again. And it's that story from the front of the Bible to the back of the Bible over and over again. And yet we still mess it up, every day. I
Hmm.
mean, it's what we have to do. So, but we just get back, we get knocked down, we get back up, we try it again. And, it's what we have to do. So,
Yeah. I think the example from to back, like you mentioned, with the exception of Jesus, is just full of flawed people, which I think those coming from the outside, not understanding what those stories are, probably don't realize that that's what it's full of.
right. Well, I think in some regards, a lot of Christians have been perceived as kind of a holier now, because that's, in all honesty, how some have presented themselves over the years.
Right.
And what people don't realize is that really, truly, loving God and loving others is all about forgiveness. It's all about having grace. You know, it's not about, sugarcoating anything. It's
Hmm.
definitely not about that, but it is about saying, look, we want you how you are, and then the Lord is going to fix whatever it is that he needs to fix in your life, and we're going to love you through it the whole way, and I mean, I've said that multiple times is, I don't want to say something to steer you away from God. What I want to know is, do you want to know God, and how can I help you do that?
Yeah.
And whatever else is going on in your life, if it's, whatever it is, I'll let you and God figure that out, So,
Yeah. Absolutely. Going on to your hunting background, do you have any bucket list hunts that you want to do?
mm. um, what's funny is when you start managing, a piece of land, my desire to do, like, if I want to shoot a deer or a turkey, I honestly want to shoot it on the land that I'm working to manage. I don't
Mm.
have any desire to really shoot a deer anywhere else than where we're working hard to do this,
Yeah.
And I've been lucky enough. I've shot a handful of decent deer, but if I was spending the same amount of money and traveling the country, I'd have probably shot more, in all honesty. Um, a few years ago, we went to Maine and we shot eiders and white-winged whistling ducks. That was fun. Um, I've been to, I've been really lucky that I fished in Alaska. I've fished in South America. I've caught peacock bass on the Rio Negro River. That was the bucket list
Yeah.
trip for sure.
What was that like?
They are the ultimate fish, in my opinion. They do all the things. They're strong. They jump out of the water. They break baits in half. They're just, you know, they're so powerful. That yeah, they're a top tier fish in my. I mean, I've caught tarpon. I've caught a couple billfish. Nothing billfish wise to really write home about. Um, but to be honest, anymore, it gets real simple. I really just want to be catching redfish behind the house if I can do it. Or hunting on the farm. I mean, not that I wouldn't like to do some things, but I think when I was younger, it was like, oh, I want to shoot an elk and I want to shoot a pronghorn. And I really probably do want to shoot a pronghorn just because I don't know many people that have. So I think that would be cool. Um, my wife wants to go down to the Yucatan and shoot one of those oscillated turkeys. I'm trying to think, but yeah, I mean, I've always thought it would be cool to shoot like a bighorn sheep of some sort, but in all honesty, that's not really that's not an option for me in the world that I'm in, just because that's a rather expensive proposition to do.
Oh yeah.
So, a moose would be cool, but I might not do any of that stuff, and that'd be okay too. So I spent a little bit of time last year trying to catch a bluefin tuna, and I think because I tried and didn't, that I really want to do that. I had a buddy take me a few times, and yeah, I didn't get to go any this year, but I'd like to do that. I'd like to, because I started that bucket, so to speak. So I'd like
Right.
to check it off and do it.
Was that off of North
But yeah,
Carolina coast?
right. Yeah. Yeah. We're lucky. They come in pretty close in the wintertime, and catching ones can be easy. I mean, reeling one in is not, but
Yeah.
catching one can be easy. If you go on the right day, but you just got to have all the right gear to do it, which is, it's like all fishing. When you show up on the right day, you can't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
So,
From the biologist perspective, there's and maybe this is more of an environmentalist thing, but the area that I'm at just south of Raleigh, like I've been told if I fish in like the Cape Fear River, don't eat the fish, or there's certain lakes that they mentioned don't eat the fish. Is there a particular reason for that, or is it just something there has affected the taste?
it depends on the area. The Department of Health, North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. We a lot of times will collect the fish for them. They will do the testing and they will make the distinction on consumption advisories across the state. And each, there are some statewide consumption advisories, but there's also some localized consumption advisories for a river or a particular creek or something like that. And it could be, in large part, most of those advisories are based off of some sort of toxin that's in the water. Mercury is a big one. PFAS is the new one that's had been in the news a lot. That's a concern on the Cape Fear River. I did some work on PCBs in the past, and toxins, that kind of stuff. But if you have that concern, the best thing you can do is go to that web page, and it has a great, it's the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. They do a great job of spelling out, you can eat the fish, or your children should eat the fish less, and it spells it out in plain English for anybody to understand.
Okay. That's a good resource. While we're
Mm-hmm.
on that topic, where can people find you?
Our webpage, it just changed. We're .gov now, which I still got to remember, but um, it is NC Wildlife. It's ncwildlife.gov.
And the podcast is the Two Bald Biologists podcast is the full name.
That's right. Better Fishing with Two Bald Biologists. Again, it's the Wildlife Commission's podcast, the Division of Inland Fisheries. You can look it up. It's on every, iTunes and Spotify and anywhere you can get a podcast. This podcast, you can listen to our podcast as well. So
perfect. And what kind of guests do you typically have on there?
Oh, it could be anything from a local guide or a local fisherman. We've had professional bass fishermen on it. We've had our biologist on it. I'm trying to put my wife on it. We're going to talk about kids fishing, family fishing.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've had a myriad of different people on it to talk about that. Industry folks, tackle folks, that kind of thing. We've talked about having them on it as well. We've had our director on it and our chief on it, and anybody who we think can talk about fish, we'd love to have them on there, and it's allowed us to have a lot of good, interesting conversations, and also the goal is to show people that one, we fish too. We're not just making rules up to give people a hard time. Is we're trying to kind of show people that one, we use the resource too. We're fishermen just like everybody else, but also share our data and talk about the work we're doing, because I tell my folks all the time, if we're not talking about the work we're doing, it's the same as if we didn't do it in a lot of regards. So we need to let people know that this work, and it's significant. I mean, the amount of work that we do just in the coast of North Carolina is impressive. So
yeah.
So it's up to us to let folks know that we're doing it. So
Do you
right
have
now
any?
we've got,
Go ahead.
just in the coast, we've got 8 or 9 surveys that are all happening at the same time every day. So
Oh wow.
it's a lot of projects that we have going on. So
Yeah, that's very cool. Do you have any updates about the storm that went through Western North Carolina? I'm sure that affected the waterways coming out of there. Are we still dealing with contaminations from that?
So I just talked to our Piedmont supervisor yesterday, not Piedmont, the mountain supervisor yesterday, and the web page has been updated. Again, you go to ncwildlife.gov, and you click on the trout, you click on the fishing link, and then you can click on our trout page, and it's got a lot of updated information where we're not going to be able to stock trout this year, where we are going to be able to stock trout, what's going on at the hatcheries, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
The short answer to that is there is some shortfalls in trout this year, but it's a fraction. We're not business as usual, but we're a lot closer to business as usual than we are not.
Oh,
Would
that's
be
good.
the highlight there. So, yeah, we're not stocking quite as many fish, but we are stocking fish. Trout fishing in North Carolina is open, ready for business. Yes, there is going to be some places where access has changed. And that's the important part about why they updated the trout page, is to kind of get all that information in the hands of anglers. So if you're interested in, planning a trout trip to our mountains, my advice would be to go to that page, look at the trout map, look at what streams are being stocked, look at the access areas that are open versus closed. And you should be able to plan a trip where you should have a reasonable expectation of success assuming the conditions for fishing are right and that kind of thing as
Right.
well. So it's not perfect. No, there never is, but we are, you know, like with any storm, we are slowly coming out of it. And every day is a little bit better than the last. And with the improvements and the repairs that we're going to be doing on our hatcheries and also purchasing another hatchery, um, once all the dust settles, we should be stronger than we've ever been before, which is also a good thing. We should have kind of more resilience built into the system
Hmm.
if this were to ever happen again. So
Yeah, that makes sense. That's good. It's very good to hear. I assume if an area is being stocked, those fish are going to be safe to eat. There's nothing contaminating the water there.
yeah, there's nothing I'm aware. I mean, the the same consumption advisories stand,
Yeah.
so none of those I'm aware of have changed as a result of the storm. But if they did, you could go to the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. That's my disclaimer, is go there and adhere to those consumption advisories and you'll be fine. But yeah, there's nothing that I'm aware of that's unique to the storm that's causing problems. So
Right. Is there when that storm happened, was there anything, I guess, noticeable that traveled all the way down to the coast because of that?
not really. And the main reason for that is most of our, the Roanoke River starts, well up above Danville, Virginia.
Hmm.
The Neuse River kind of starts in the Piedmont. The Tar River starts in the Piedmont as well. So most of our mountain water actually kind of goes out through South Carolina and or goes back west again, back towards the Mississippi. So we
Hmm.
really didn't see a whole lot. I mean, we saw some rain and we saw some high water because
Yeah.
it wasn't just, in the mountains where that rain fell, but it wasn't anything noteworthy in terms of that. Now, when we have a hurricane on the coast, it's a whole different story. And it's just different because when we have a storm, and it's not that one's worse than the other because it's not a competition when you're talking about a hurricane. That's the competition you don't want to win. I always tell folks that whoever is experiencing it wins, because they're dealing with it, and we need to have some grace for their situation. But the crazy thing about Helene, versus a coastal storm was, the water comes up here and you know, it's flat and it's everywhere. The water in the mountains, it's concentrated in the valleys, and all it does is pick up speed. So it's bad in a whole different kind of way. And it was a very, very violent, those floods were very violent in how they, operated, and not really anything like what we're used to on the coast. Um, we're used to more widespread, everything's bad. And the weird thing about Helene is if you were in one valley, it could have been terrible. You could have been in the next valley over and it could have been fine.
Yeah.
So it was a different storm. But yeah, it's there will be things that are probably never the same, and then that we'll have to just adapt to over time. So
Right. Speaking of the flat area, I noticed there's a lot more of kind of a gradual decline going out into the ocean compared to what I'm used to growing up in California, where it just drops straight down. Is that
sure, yeah.
Yeah. Is that natural?
Our continental shelf is a lot further offshore than it is on the West Coast.
Oh, okay.
And so yeah, through time, because it's so far out, um, over time, siltation and stuff has made that kind of a slow, gradual deepening of the water. And it also depends on where you are, but yeah, if you're off the coast, it's probably nothing like what you're used to from California. So
Right.
it's just different, and the mountains are a lot closer to the ocean there than they are here, which
That's
also
true.
is part of that too. So
Yeah. Is there anywhere on the East Coast you know of that would drop off like that?
further north, or where you get more where the mountains are closer,
Okay.
Maine and Nova Scotia of that way, it would probably be a little more similar to California and the West Coast. So
Yeah. So that it sounds like then having mountains is kind of a key hand in hand feature for something like that, regardless of where you are in the world. Is that a
well,
fair
it's
assessment?
it's all in kind of how those mountains formed in relation to the tectonic plates and that. I mean, and we're starting to get. I mean, I'm a biologist. I study fish, but
Yeah. Sorry.
um,
I'm sure that
but
affects
it
like where
has to do
fish
with
live though.
it does. But yeah, it has to do with how those mountains formed through the plates pushing up beside each other, and as they do that, generally it makes for stronger drops in elevation,
Mhm.
versus, you know, coast of North Carolina, the mountains are fairly far away. And so there's all this relief, over time where, the rivers have silted in and sediment has moved and, ocean sediments also settled out of the ocean as it's washed in too. And there's all different kinds of dynamics that move this
Yeah.
sand back and forth, from the mountains and also from the ocean to our shores as well. So
Is that also related to it seems like anywhere that I went like snorkeling in California that I would be right on top of like a kelp bed. Is that
mhm.
exclusive to the Pacific?
We don't really have kelp beds here. We have other plants that grow in the ocean, and in our sounds and bays and rivers, but we don't really have kelp in the same way. They're kelp has a different. Mainly, it's too warm, for kelp. Kelp
That makes
needs
sense.
cooler waters, and we just don't have that here. You know, a lot our we have a lot of native plants, but they're just different, and they grow differently as a result. So
Yeah. Do you have a recommendation for a good place to snorkel off the coast, or is that something you kind of have to take a boat out to on the East Coast?
so I'm gonna throw you a total curve.
Okay.
I'm gonna give you a real. We have in North Carolina some natural lakes. They're not a traditional lake like you have around Raleigh, which is a reservoir, which is we took a chunk of the river, we slapped a dam up, and the water impounded behind it.
Yeah.
We have they're actually like naturally formed bowls, so to speak, in the coast. And the neat thing about them is in most instances the shoreline is the highest elevation around that lake. So the only rain that really gets into that lake is either through a little bit of swamp runoff or rainfall. And Lake Phelps, which is near Columbia, North Carolina, is crystal clear, would be a great place to snorkel. And you would see a completely different thing. It's a sandy bottom, you'd see bass and pumpkin seed and yellow perch just swimming around in the grass. And I think it would be a really neat place to do that. The other one would be Lake Waccamaw. It's very much for all the same reasons.
Yeah.
And I think those would be neat places to snorkel and kind of watch fish and see what they do. And, it would be neat. We also have a North Carolina snorkeling trail. You can look it up on our on our webpage, and there's spots all the way up to the mountains, down to the coast, where you can snorkel and see fish, and it's almost like birding, but to see different species of fish and different
Yeah.
places you could go to see those fish. So something different. It's not for everybody. It's definitely not something that most fishermen think about. But anytime you can watch fish, you can learn a lot that might benefit you out on the water on a different day. So
Yeah. Is that I want to say I looked up that trail before and I had trouble making heads or tails of it. Is there a way to read it that it's like a start to finish kind of thing?
it's not like a start here and end here type thing, is my understanding. It's more of these are places you can go
Hmm.
to do that. So
Like pick
so
one for the trip kind of thing.
right, yeah. So trail could be a bit of a misnomer, but these are spots. But if you wanted to plan a trip, we could, day one we'll do here, day two we'll go there, kind of thing. Might be more kind of indicative of how they meant by a trail.
Yeah,
So,
that makes sense.
but there's a lot of neat. I mean, North Carolina has a lot of different water. You know, we're just such a wide state with so much variation. Um, there's a lot of different things you can see. You know, I mean, the coast has one set of species and the mountains has a completely different set of species in a lot of regards, especially once you're in some of our smaller streams. I mean, there's obviously some overlap, but it's in a very interesting state as far as the diversity that it provides.
Yeah, that's the impression I've been getting since I moved here. It's very cool. All right. So the last question I have to wrap it up is, what is your favorite Bible verse?
It's funny because I was thinking about, I had a feeling you were going to ask, and it's changed in the last maybe year or so, and it really changed. My wife and I taught a, a marriage course at church, and I didn't even realize that the whole month long set of lessons was going to be really in one verse, which is seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you. And to me, again, in talking about how we muck up all the time, and we have
Mm,
to ask God's forgiveness, and we have to move forward. It doesn't matter if you're being a father, if you're being a husband, if you're trying to be the best at work, if you're trying to be a good neighbor. If you're seeking first the kingdom of God, I mean that fixes most of your problems, and if you ask yourself, am I seeking first the kingdom of God, and you're honest with yourself about your answer, it's a course corrector, and I mean, I do the same thing with my Bible studies as I do with my fishing stuff, and with my analysis. Is there's a lot of complicated stuff out there that's hard to get your head around, and I spend a lot of time trying to fit it into this small brain of mine, and focusing on seeking first the kingdom of God is, if you do that, everything else kind of falls into place right behind that, and
hmm.
and probably the next one behind that would be, as for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. Those two things. If I'm doing that, I think I'll be okay. So
Yeah, those are really good ones.
yeah. I mean, I tell folks that the Bible, my favorite verses are kind of like my tackle box. They have I have favorite verses for favorite situations, and it's the
Hmm.
same thing with my tackle. Is there's certain situations where I need this, and there's other situations where I need something else. And it's not that one is any better than the other. It's just there's certain moments that I need the other, one versus another one, so to speak. So
Yeah, I get that. I'm always thinking of changing. I like to put a verse at the end of my signature and my emails, and then every now and then
mhm.
I'll change it just because that there's one that means more to me at that time.
Sure. Sure. Oh yeah. There's definitely verses that had to hang on to just to get me through a moment that, later I'm like, what was that verse again? But for a period of the time, it was, on my heart and on my mind and couldn't shake it. So it depends on the season of the life you're in. It depends on, also what the Lord's telling you to focus your attention on, because that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that was all the questions I had. Did you have anything else you were hoping to talk about?
No, I appreciate you having me on. I really enjoyed it. I don't get to talk all this about all this all the time, so that was good. And but yeah, I appreciate it. So thanks
Yeah.
for reaching out.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a pleasure running into you at it was I think it was the Dixie Deer Classic. I think it was.
That's right. That's right.
But yeah, it was fun talking to you then, and I appreciate you coming on.
Sure thing. Sure thing. I hope this goes well for you. And if you need me back on for anything, you let me know.
I will do. I appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in on greatoutdoorspodcast.com. And if you happen to be listening or watching on one of our social media platforms, you should check out greatoutdoorspodcast.com for some cool merch like this hat or this awesome coffee cup for camping. And this awesome sweater as well, which features our classic Genesis 27:3. Take your quiver and your bow and go hunt me some venison. Your wife's gonna love the way you look in this. Right, honey?
Uh-huh.
greatoutdoorspodcast.com.
Why?